First of all, Coach, thank you for sharing your time with us here in Queensland. Hopefully you've enjoyed your trip here to Australia and you got everything out of it that you wanted to get out of it. And hopefully we can see you on our shores again in the not too distant future.
Well, I hope I can come back again. This was my sixth trip to Australia. I came here 47 years ago, and I've watched this crazy game of basketball just grow and grow and grow in this country.
And it's developing, and it's certainly because of people like yourself and the influence that you have here in Australia. So we're very appreciative of it. I guess if we could start off with anything, we'd probably want to touch on coaching. So if you can just talk to us a little bit about the growth you've seen in the coaching standards here in Australia, and maybe kind of compare it to the standards that you have in America, and what some of the differences would be, that'd be great.
Well, like I said, I came here 47 years ago, and basketball really wasn't very good 47 years ago here. I think I could safely say there was only one really good competitive team in the country, and it happened to be the team down in Melbourne, the Tigers, that Lindsay Gaze was still playing for then. And I met Lindsay then. I also met another guy named Barry Barnes, and those two guys have had a great impact on basketball in this country. But one of the things is I got acquainted with Lindsay down in Victoria. He was always picking my brain, and we were talking together, and he always said, if we're going to grow the game of basketball in this country, we've got to develop coaches. You know, one guy can't coach everybody in the country, so you've got to multiply yourself. And I think as I came back 4 years later, and then 2 more years later, and then 6 years later, and then 25 years later, and now this time, what I've seen, especially in Melbourne, and in talking to Lindsay and Barry, what I've seen is they've developed some really, really good teams, and there are a lot of great Australian basketball players. We see them all the time in the U.S. playing on our college teams there. We saw Patty Mills just a few weeks ago just be a star in the championship game for the San Antonio Spurs, but those players didn't develop just because of their ability. They developed because somebody taught them how to play. Somebody coached them. And I think as I look at Victoria, for example, they're really a strong basketball area, and that's kind of where the game got started in this country. But I think they did some right things in saying we're going to develop coaching, and I saw a very eager group of people there. I just spent a few days with Barry Barnes last week. And I was talking to Barry then, and my wife and I stayed in his home for a week way back there 43 years ago. And I said, Barry, would you have ever dreamed you'd spend your entire career in basketball? And he said, no. But he said, I learned about the game, I learned how to coach it, and it opened the door for me. And if you're going to develop players in this country, and if you're going to develop them, especially here in Queensland, you're going to have to develop coaches, Leonard, because, you know, if you're in charge of developing players, you can't do it all by yourself.
Where do you think coaching and coach development is heading? If you could look into the future, what are some of the, I guess, characteristics or values you think coaches need to have?
Well, coaches have got to love the players. They got to love the players and love the game. I mean, I don't know how you could ever teach a game that you didn't love yourself. But you got to like the players you're dealing with, and that doesn't mean that liking them means that you accept everything they do, because any young person that begins to learn the game is going to make mistakes. The fundamentals of the game are so important. Things like dribbling the ball, passing the ball, shooting the ball, defending, doing all those things. Those are important, but coaches have got to direct that path. They've got to figure out what they want to teach. And unfortunately in America, I've said this several times to you, and I know you agree with me, that we've gotten competitiveness and participation ahead of the skill level sometimes in America. Now there's some awful talented players that don't have very good skill level, but because they're so athletic they can play well. But it makes sense to learn how to play the game well through fundamentals. And coaches have got to know those fundamentals. They've got to know how to teach them. They've got to be learners. Goodness, today, all you got to do is get on the internet. You can pull up all kind of blogs, all kinds of videos, all kinds of things that help you teach the game. And a coach needs to be able to teach the game and the way it ought to be played. Again, going back to the NBA championships, watching San Antonio play basketball when they won the NBA championship was a delight, because they played the game the way it was supposed to be played. And they passed the ball. They were unselfish. In the championship series against Miami, 5 games, the San Antonio Spurs passed the ball over 700 more times than Miami did. And that's why they were successful. They always were getting the better shot.